The amber light of dawn crept over San Angelo, Texas in 1876, painting the dusty streets gold. When Emmett Oliver first heard the wolves singing back to the strange woman on the edge of town, and he knew right then his solitary life in these wild territories was about to change forever. Emmett had been tracking a wounded elk through the scrub brush for the better part of an hour, his powerful shoulders carrying his rifle with practiced ease, sweat already dampening his long, dark hair despite the early hour. At 27, he had spent the last decade living between the settlements and the wilderness, preferring the company of mountains to men, trading furs and offering his skills as a guide to those foolish enough to venture into territory they did not understand. His thick beard and sun-weathered skin told the story of a man who had chosen the hard path, but his clear blue eyes still held intelligence and something else, a loneliness he would never admit aloud. The elk's trail had led him closer to San Angelo than he usually ventured, close enough that he could see the scattered buildings and hear the distant sounds of the waking town. But what stopped him in his tracks was not the sight of civilization. It was the sound of a woman's voice, soft and melodic, speaking in tones that seemed to dance on the morning air. And more impossibly, it was the sound of animals responding. He moved silently through the mesquite and prickly pear, his muscled frame surprisingly graceful for his size, until he could see into a small clearing. A woman knelt in the dirt, her simple brown dress dusty at the hem, her copper-colored hair falling loose down her back. Around her sat 3 coyotes, their ears pricked forward, their usual wariness completely absent. As Emmett watched, transfixed, the woman extended her hand, and one of the coyotes, a scarred old male, stepped forward and pressed his nose to her palm. She was speaking, but not in any language Emmett recognized. The sounds were somewhere between humming and words, a communication that bypassed human speech entirely. The coyotes seemed to understand perfectly. She gestured toward the east, and the old male yipped once before turning and loping away, the others following. Emmett must have made some sound, some shift in the brush, because the woman's head snapped up, and for the first time he saw her face. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, with features that were neither conventionally beautiful nor plain, but striking in their expressiveness. Her green eyes were wide-set and intelligent, her mouth generous, her chin determined. But it was the way she looked at him that caught his breath. There was no fear, only assessment, as if she were measuring his soul and finding it more interesting than threatening. "You have been following that elk for too long," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "He has gone north, toward the river. He will not survive another day regardless." Emmett stepped out of the brush, his rifle lowered but still in his hands. "You some kind of witch?" A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Is that what they call women who pay attention in this town?" "They call you something, I'm guessing." "They say she talks to animals," the woman replied, standing and brushing the dust from her skirt. "They whisper it like it is something shameful or frightening, but really, I just listen better than most people do." Emmett found himself moving closer, drawn by something he could not name. Listening to coyotes is one thing, having them sit peaceful like house dogs is another. "Everything wants to be understood," she said simply. "Animals are often more honest about that need than people." She studied him with those unsettling green eyes. "You are the mountain man, Pierce Sullivan. I have heard of you too." The sound of his full name, unused for so long, was strange on the morning air. "Just call me Pierce, and you would be Eliza Oliver." She began walking back toward town, and somehow Pierce found himself falling into step beside her, his hunt forgotten. "I came to San Angelo 6 months ago with my uncle. He is a doctor, or tries to be, The people here tolerate me because of him, mostly. Tolerate is an interesting word. Eliza laughed, and the sound was like water over stones. They think I am strange. They are not entirely wrong, but I am useful too, which earns me a certain amount of space. When their cattle wander off, I can usually find them. When someone's horse goes lame, I can often tell them why. It is not magic. It is just paying attention to what the animals are trying to communicate. They reached the edge of town, where the wild scrub gave way to rough-hewn buildings and dusty streets. Already, people were emerging for the day's work. Pierce saw more than a few curious glances thrown their way, saw the way conversations paused as they passed. Eliza seemed not to notice, or perhaps she simply did not care. "Why are you telling me all this?" Pierce asked as they stopped in front of a small building with a hand-painted sign reading Dr. Theodore Oliver, physician. "Because you understand what it is to be apart," Eliza said, meeting his eyes directly. "I saw it in the way you move, in the way you watched me. We are both outsiders here, Pierce Sullivan. The difference is you chose it and I had it chosen for me." Before Pierce could respond, the door to the doctor's office opened, and a portly man with kind eyes and graying hair stepped out. "Eliza, there you are. I was beginning to worry." He turned his attention to Pierce, and his expression grew cautious. "Mr. Sullivan, I have heard much about you." "Nothing too terrible, I hope," Pierce said, though he knew full well what his reputation likely was. The wild man from the mountains, more comfortable with bears than people, dangerous when provoked. "My niece has a gift for finding trouble," Dr. Oliver said, his tone affectionate despite the words. "Or perhaps trouble has a gift for finding her. Either way, I am grateful someone was nearby." "I was no trouble, Uncle," Eliza said, rolling her eyes. "I was speaking with the coyotes. They told me about a den of pups 3 miles east near the Anderson Ranch. The mother was killed by a rancher last week. The pups will die if someone does not help them." "Eliza, you cannot save every creature in Texas," her uncle said gently. "No, but I can save some of them." She turned back to Pierce. "Would you help me? I will need someone who knows how to move through rough territory, and someone the ranchers will not shoot on sight when I explain what I am doing." Pierce should have said no. He had furs to trade, supplies to gather, and a long journey back to his cabin in the hills north of town. He had no business getting involved with a strange woman who talked to animals, no matter how intriguing she was, but he found himself nodding instead. "When do we leave?" "Now is as good a time as any," Eliza said, practically glowing with enthusiasm. "I will need to gather some supplies." "Meet me here in an hour," Pierce agreed, though he still was not entirely sure why. As he walked toward the general store, he was aware of the stares following him, the whispered conversations. He caught fragments as he passed. "She talks to animals, that one. Not natural. The mountain man better watch himself. That girl is touched in the head." He had been called worse things than a mountain man. And something about the way they spoke of Eliza, with that mixture of fear and disdain, set his teeth on edge. She was different, certainly. But different was not the same as wrong. An hour later, Eliza emerged from her uncle's office wearing practical riding clothes, her hair braided back, a canvas sack over her shoulder. She had changed into trousers, which Pierce suspected gave the town gossips even more to whisper about. On her they simply looked sensible. "You ride?" he asked. "Well enough," she said. "Though if you tell me we are walking 3 miles through this heat, I may reconsider your company." Pierce surprised himself by almost smiling. "I have horses. You can ride Dancer. She is gentle." "Gentle and I are not always well acquainted, but I will manage." Pierce's horses were stabled at the edge of town, and as they walked there together, Eliza kept up a steady stream of conversation. She told him about growing up in New Orleans, about how her unusual ability had manifested when she was a child, about the way her parents had not known what to make of her. After they died of yellow fever 3 years ago, her uncle had been the only family willing to take her in. He had brought her west, hoping the wide open spaces might be easier for someone like her. And are they? Pierce asked, genuinely curious. Easier, I mean. Eliza was quiet for a moment, considering. Yes and no. There are more animals here, more wild things to understand. But people are people everywhere. They fear what they do not understand. You do not seem afraid of much. Oh, I am afraid of plenty, she said. I am afraid of what happens to creatures that cannot speak for themselves. I am afraid of cruelty, of indifference. I am afraid that one day I will stop caring what people think, and that will make me truly alone. They reached the stable, and Pierce saddled both horses in silence, processing what she had said. Dancer, a dappled gray mare with a patient disposition, stood calmly while Eliza introduced herself, running her hands along the horse's neck and murmuring in that strange, melodic way she had. Dancer's ears swiveled forward, and she turned her head to nuzzle Eliza's shoulder. She likes you, Pierce observed, swinging up onto his own mount, a powerful bay gelding named Scout. Most animals do eventually, Eliza said, mounting Dancer with more grace than Pierce had expected. It is the people part I struggle with. They rode east, following Eliza's directions toward the Anderson ranch. The sun climbed higher, turning the landscape into a shimmering palette of gold and brown and endless blue sky. Pierce had ridden this territory 100 times, but somehow it looked different with Eliza beside him. She pointed out things he had never noticed before. The way a certain bird's call meant water nearby, the pattern in the dirt that indicated a snake's den, the subtle signs that a predator had passed through recently. How do you know all this? He asked finally. I pay attention, she said. And the animals tell me in their way. It is not like human speech. It is more like understanding intent, emotion, need. A wolf's howl is not just sound. It carries meaning. Pack cohesion, territorial warning, loneliness. If you listen with more than your ears, you can understand. And people think you are the strange one, Pierce muttered. Eliza laughed. People prefer to think they are separate from the natural world. I suppose it makes it easier to dominate it. But we are all part of the same system, connected in ways most folks refuse to see. They reached the Anderson ranch around midday, the sun beating down mercilessly. The main house was a low, sprawling structure of wood and stone, surrounded by empty corrals and storage buildings. Pierce knew the Andersons by reputation. Hard-working, fair-dealing, but with a shoot-first attitude toward predators that threatened their livestock. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. He was middle-aged, weathered by sun and work, his expression wary. Sullivan. Did not expect to see you around here. What brings you to my land? Henry Anderson, Pierce acknowledged with a nod. This is Eliza Oliver, Dr. Oliver's niece. She has information about a coyote den on your property. Henry's expression darkened. Got no love for coyotes, Sullivan. Lost 3 chickens and a young calf to them this month alone. The mother is dead, Eliza said, her voice calm but firm. You killed her last week. Her pups are too young to hunt. They are starving in a den 3 miles east of here. I want permission to retrieve them and relocate them away from your ranch. Henry stared at her as if she had sprouted a second head. You want to save coyote pups? Miss Oliver, those animals are vermin. They will grow up to raid someone else's livestock. They will grow up to be part of the ecosystem that keeps rodent populations under control, Eliza countered. Kill all the coyotes, and you will be overrun with rats and rabbits that destroy your crops and spread disease. Everything has a place, Mr. Anderson. I am just asking to move these particular animals to a place where they are less likely to cross paths with your livestock." Pierce watched the exchange with interest. Eliza spoke with a confidence and clarity that left no room for dismissal. She was not pleading. She was explaining reality and giving Henry the chance to be reasonable about it. Henry looked to Pierce. "She always like this. I only just met her this morning," Pierce admitted. "But I would guess yes. You vouch for her, Sullivan, that she is not going to cause problems." Pierce found himself nodding. "I vouch for her." Something in his tone must have convinced Henry, because the rancher sighed and waved his hand. "Fine. Take the damn pups, but keep them far from my property, you understand. And if they come back when they are grown, I will not hesitate to shoot them." "Fair enough," Eliza said. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson." They rode away from the ranch, following a dry creek bed toward a cluster of rocks and scrub brush. Eliza dismounted near an outcropping of stone, her head tilted as if listening to something Pierce could not hear. She knelt and peered into a dark crevice between the rocks. "They are in there," she said softly. "4 of them, scared and hungry." Pierce dismounted and crouched beside her. He could smell the musky scent of coyote, could see small tracks in the dust. "How do you want to do this?" "Let me talk to them first. They are afraid, but they are also desperate. If I can make them understand I am trying to help, they might come willingly." Pierce settled back on his heels and watched as Eliza positioned herself near the den entrance. She began to make soft, coaxing sounds, not quite whines, not quite words. Minutes passed. The sun beat down. Sweat trickled down Pierce's back. Just when he was beginning to think the pups would not emerge, a small nose appeared in the darkness, followed by a pair of large, frightened eyes. Eliza continued her soft encouragement, and slowly the first pup emerged. It was pitifully thin, its fur dull and patchy. 3 more followed, equally malnourished and wary. Eliza did not reach for them immediately. Instead, she opened her pack and took out strips of dried meat, laying them on the ground between herself and the pups. The hunger won out over fear. The pups crept forward and began to eat, tearing at the meat with desperate intensity. While they were distracted, Eliza slowly reached out and touched the nearest one. It flinched but did not run. She murmured something in that strange language of hers, and the pup seemed to relax fractionally. "I need something to carry them in," she said to Pierce. "They are too weak to follow on foot, and I do not trust them not to scatter if they are startled." Pierce had a sturdy canvas bag meant for carrying supplies. It was not ideal, but it would serve. One by one, Eliza coaxed the pups closer, handling them with gentle confidence until all 4 were secured in the bag, which Pierce tied carefully to leave ventilation but prevent escape. "Now what?" he asked. "Now we take them north into the hills," Eliza said. "Away from the ranches, away from where they will be seen as threats. There are rabbit populations up there, water sources, enough territory that they can establish themselves without threatening anyone's livestock. That is a day's ride at least." "Then we better get moving," Eliza said, swinging back onto Dancer with the precious cargo secured to the saddle. Pierce could have argued. Could have pointed out that the sun was already past its peak, that they would have to camp overnight, that traveling alone together would give the gossips in San Angelo plenty to talk about. But he found he did not care. There was something compelling about Eliza's single-minded determination to save 4 orphaned predators that no one else would have given a second thought to. They rode north, leaving the ranch lands behind and climbing into rougher territory. Pierce led them along paths he knew well, toward a series of valleys and canyons that held reliable water and abundant game. As the afternoon wore on, the landscape changed from flat scrubland to rolling hills studded with juniper and oak. The air cooled fractionally as they gained elevation. Eliza kept checking on the pups, stopping periodically to give them water and more food. Pierce watched the way she handled the small animals, the complete lack of hesitation or disgust. Most women he knew would not even touch a coyote pup, let alone nurse 4 of them with such dedicated care. "You ever think about getting married?" Pierce found himself asking, then immediately regretted the bluntness of the question. "I mean, seems like any man would be lucky to have someone as capable as you." Eliza glanced at him, surprise flickering across her face. "That is a sudden change of topic." "Sorry, forget I said anything." "No, it is all right. I am just not used to people asking me personal questions." She was quiet for a moment, guiding Dancer around a boulder. "I thought about it once. There was a man in New Orleans before my parents died. He seemed interested, seemed to understand. But when he saw me with the animals, really saw what I could do, he looked at me differently, like I was something to be afraid of. I realized then that most people want someone they can understand, someone who fits into a neat category. I have never fit into any category neatly." "His loss," Pierce said simply. Eliza smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "What about you, Pierce Sullivan? Why does a man like you live alone in the mountains, tried living in towns, did not take to it?" "People talk too much, say too little. Mountains do not lie to you. Animals do not pretend to be something they are not. So we are the same in that way," Eliza observed. "Both more comfortable with the wilderness than with civilization. Seems so." They made camp that evening in a protected canyon, near a stream that bubbled over smooth stones. Pierce set up a simple camp while Eliza released the pups under her careful supervision, letting them drink from the stream and explore their surroundings. They were still weak, but the food and water had revived them somewhat. They stayed close to Eliza, as if recognizing her as a source of safety. Pierce started a fire and prepared a simple meal of beans and bacon while Eliza sat with the pups, continuing her strange communication. Watching her in the firelight, Pierce felt something shift in his chest. She was beautiful, he realized, not in any conventional sense, but in the way wild things were beautiful. Completely herself, unapologetic, necessary. "What?" Eliza asked, noticing his stare. "Nothing, just thinking." "Dangerous occupation, thinking." Pierce huffed a laugh. "Tell me more about how you do it. The talking to animals thing." Eliza leaned back against a rock, one of the pups curled in her lap. "It is hard to explain. You know how sometimes you can tell what a person is feeling, even if they do not say anything? By their posture, their expressions, the way they move." Pierce nodded. "It is like that, but more. Animals communicate constantly. They just do not use words. A dog wagging its tail, a cat's purr, a horse's whinny. Those are all forms of language. Most people only understand the most basic signals. I learned to read the subtler ones. And somehow I learned to send signals back, not with words but with intent, emotion, body language. I show them what I mean and they understand. And that works with any animal, most of them. Some are easier than others. Wolves and dogs are the easiest. They are pack animals, used to complex social communication. Cats are more challenging. They are independent, less interested in what I have to say. Birds are almost impossible. Their minds work too differently from mine. But coyotes, they are like dogs. Similar. More cautious, more wild. But yes, they understand pack dynamics, cooperation, trust. Once I show them I am not a threat, we can communicate." Pierce served out the food and they ate in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. The pups had settled into a small pile near Eliza, their bellies full, their fear temporarily eased. Above them, stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, more stars than could ever be seen from a town, a thick blanket of light across the darkness. "You ever get lonely?" Eliza asked quietly. "Living the way you do," Pierce considered the question. Before today, he would have said no without hesitation. But something about Eliza's presence, about their easy conversation and shared purpose, made him realize that maybe he had been lonely for a long time. He just had not acknowledged it. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Mostly I tell myself I prefer the solitude. But nights like this, with someone to talk to, someone who understands, this is better than I remembered people could be." "I feel the same," Eliza said. "My uncle is kind and I love him, but he does not understand me, not really. He accepts me, which is more than most people manage, but understanding is different." "I understand you," Pierce said, surprising himself with the declaration. Eliza looked at him across the fire, her green eyes reflecting the flames. "I think you might." "And I think I understand you too, Pierce Sullivan. We are both people who stepped outside the world everyone else lives in. We see things differently, feel things differently. It is lonely out here on the edges, but maybe it does not have to be." Something passed between them in that moment, something that needed no words. It was recognition, connection, the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed. Pierce cleared his throat, breaking the intensity of the moment. "We should rest. Long ride tomorrow to get these pups settled and get back to San Angelo." They arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, propriety maintained despite the vast emptiness around them. But as Pierce lay staring up at the stars, listening to the soft sounds of Eliza's breathing and the small rustlings of the coyote pups, he found himself thinking about possibilities he had long since dismissed. Maybe he did not have to be alone. Maybe there was someone who could share his world, who would not find it lacking or strange. Maybe that someone was sleeping 10 feet away, under the same stars, thinking the same impossible thoughts. Morning came with a blaze of pink and gold across the eastern sky. Pierce woke to find Eliza already up, tending to the pups with patient care. She had braided her hair back, and there was a smudge of dirt on her cheek that somehow made her look more human, more touchable. He found himself wanting to reach out and brush it away, but he kept his hands busy with breaking camp instead. They released the pups in a valley rich with game sign and protected water sources, far from any ranches or settlements. Eliza spent a long time with them, communicating in her wordless way, and Pierce had the impression she was giving them instructions, warnings, some kind of guidance for their survival. The pups seemed reluctant to leave her, but eventually their wild nature reasserted itself, and they melted into the brush, 4 shadows reclaimed by the wilderness. "Will they be all right?" Pierce asked as they mounted up for the return journey. "I think so. They are old enough to learn to hunt, and there is prey here. It will be hard, but coyotes are survivors. They will adapt." Eliza turned Dancer back toward San Angelo, but Pierce could see the sadness in her eyes. "You care about them." "Of course I care. Just because they are animals does not mean their lives matter less." They rode in silence for a while, retracing their path through the hills. But it was a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have begun to truly know each other. Pierce found himself hyper-aware of Eliza's presence beside him, the way she sat her horse, the occasional soft humming sound she made, the way her eyes constantly scanned the landscape, reading stories in every track and broken twig. "What will you do now?" Eliza asked as they descended back toward flatter country. "Return to your cabin in the mountains." "That was the plan," Pierce said. "I have furs to prepare for trading, hunting to do before winter." "When is winter in these parts?" "Few months yet." October, November usually brings the first cold, but up in the hills where I am, it comes earlier. Seems lonely, Eliza said softly, spending all winter alone. I have always done it. You get used to it. That does not mean it is good for you. Pierce glanced at her. What are you suggesting? Eliza met his eyes, and he saw uncertainty there, vulnerability. I am suggesting that maybe we do not both have to be alone. I am suggesting that in the past day, I have felt more understood and more comfortable than I have felt in years. I am suggesting that if you feel even a fraction of what I am feeling, maybe we should not pretend it does not exist. Pierce reined Scout to a stop, and Eliza stopped beside him. They sat there in the middle of the empty landscape, the sun climbing toward noon, the future stretching out in all directions. Eliza, I am not a town man. I do not know how to do this, how to court someone properly. I live rough. I have little to offer except a hard life and a lot of solitude. I do not want a town man, Eliza said firmly. I want someone who sees the world the way I do, someone who does not think I am crazy for caring about animals, someone who understands that conventional life is not the only kind of life worth living. She paused, and a hint of uncertainty crept into her voice. Unless I am misreading this entirely, if you do not feel anything, if this is just me being foolish, tell me now. Pierce thought about lying. Thought about protecting himself, maintaining his solitary existence, avoiding the risk and vulnerability that came with letting someone in. But when he looked at Eliza, at her honest, hopeful expression, at the strength and strangeness and beauty that made her unlike anyone he had ever known, he found he could not do it. You are not misreading anything, he said. I feel it too. I just do not know what to do about it. A smile broke across Eliza's face, bright as sunrise. We figure it out together. That is what people do, right? They figure it out together. They continued riding, but everything felt different now. The air seemed clearer, the landscape more vivid. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Eliza told him about growing up different, about the isolation of being misunderstood. Pierce told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, about drifting west and finding a kind of peace in the wild spaces where human complications could not reach him. But that is not living, Eliza said. That is just surviving. There is a difference, maybe, Pierce admitted, but surviving is safer. Safer is not always better. They reached San Angelo in the late afternoon, riding into town side by side. Pierce was intensely aware of the stares, the whispers that started up as they passed. He saw Mrs. Henderson clutch her shawl and hurry her daughters inside. Saw the men outside the saloon pause their conversation to watch. Saw the speculation in every eye. Let them talk, he thought. Let them whisper. None of it mattered. They stopped in front of Dr. Oliver's office, and the doctor himself emerged, relief evident on his face. Eliza, thank God. I was starting to worry when you did not return last night. We had to take the pups far enough that they would not come back to threaten the ranches, Eliza explained, dismounting. It required camping overnight. Pierce was a perfect gentleman, she added, and Pierce appreciated the way she addressed the unspoken concern directly. Dr. Oliver studied Pierce with measuring eyes. I am sure he was. Mr. Sullivan, might I have a word with you? In private. Pierce dismounted and followed the doctor inside his office, leaving Eliza to tend to the horses. The office was neat and organized, shelves lined with medical texts and bottles of medicine, the air sharp with the smell of carbolic acid and herbs. You seem like a decent man, Mr. Sullivan, Doctor. Oliver began without preamble. But my niece is my responsibility, and I need to know your intentions. Pierce appreciated the directness. I am not sure I know them myself yet, Dr. Oliver. I only met Eliza yesterday. But I will tell you this. She is the most remarkable person I have ever met, and I would count myself fortunate to spend more time in her company, if she will have me. Eliza is not like other women, the doctor said. Her gift, or whatever you want to call it, it makes her vulnerable. People fear what they do not understand. I brought her out here hoping she would find more acceptance, more freedom. Instead, I think I have just isolated her in a different way. She is not isolated, Pierce said. She is just surrounded by people too small-minded to appreciate what she is. That is not the same thing. Dr. Oliver studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You understand her. That is more than I dared hope for. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I am not a young man, Mr. Sullivan. I am 63 years old and my health is not what it was. I worry about what will happen to Eliza when I am gone. She needs someone who will protect her, someone who will not try to change her or suppress her gift. If you are that person, then you have my blessing. But if you are going to break her heart, I would prefer you leave now. I have no intention of breaking her heart, Pierce said, but I will not lie to you. I do not know how this is going to work. I am not a town person. I live in the mountains alone. That is not a life for everyone. Talk to Eliza about it, Dr. Oliver advised. She is more than capable of making her own decisions. But be honest with her. She has had enough of people who cannot handle the truth of who she is. Pierce left the office to find Eliza waiting outside, leaning against the hitching post. He give you the protective uncle speech? She asked with a wry smile. Something like that. You could have warned me. Where would be the fun in that? Eliza pushed off from the post. Walk with me. They walked to the edge of town, away from the buildings and watchful eyes, to where the settlement gave way to open country. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. I meant what I said earlier, Eliza began, about not wanting to be alone anymore. But I also understand that your life is your own, and I have no right to expect you to change it for someone you just met. What if I want to change it? Pierce asked. Eliza looked up at him, hope and caution warring in her expression. Then we need to figure out what that looks like. Because I cannot live in town, Pierce. Not long term. These people barely tolerate me now, and I do not want to spend my life being whispered about, being treated like something dangerous or shameful. Come with me, Pierce said impulsively. To my cabin, see what my life is like. If you hate it, we will figure something else out. But at least then you will know what you are saying yes or no to. You want me to just leave? Go off into the mountains with a man I barely know? Pierce heard the teasing note under the concern. Yes, that is exactly what I am suggesting. Come with me, Eliza. Let me show you my world, and if it is not right for you, I will bring you back here, no harm done. My uncle will understand if you explain it to him. Hell, he practically gave me his blessing to court you properly. Eliza laughed, a sound of pure delight. Did he really? Uncle Theodore playing matchmaker, I never would have guessed. So will you come? Eliza was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the vast landscape, at the rolling hills and endless sky. Then she turned back to Pierce, decision clear in her eyes. Yes, yes, I will come. But I am bringing my own supplies, and if there are animals in trouble along the way, we are stopping to help them. I would expect nothing less, Pierce said, and felt something in his chest loosen and expand, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. They spent the next 2 days preparing for the journey. Eliza gathered supplies and explained her decision to her uncle, who surprised her by supporting it completely. You are 23 years old, my dear, he said, more than old enough to make your own choices. And I think this mountain man of yours might be exactly what you need. Pierce restocked his own provisions, traded some furs for additional supplies, and tried to ignore the increased speculation and gossip swirling through San Angelo. He caught fragments everywhere he went. Gone off alone together. Not proper. That Oliver girl always was strange. Mountain man taking advantage. The only person who spoke to him directly about it was the sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Carter who stopped Pierce outside the general store on his second day in town. "Sullivan, you causing trouble?" Carter asked, his hand resting on his gun belt. "No trouble, Sheriff. Just preparing to head back to my cabin. Heard you are taking Dr. Oliver's niece with you. She is coming of her own free will. Ask her yourself if you do not believe me." Carter studied him with sharp eyes. "I believe you. Known you a few years now, Sullivan. You are odd, but you are honest. Just understand that if any harm comes to that girl, it will not matter how remote your cabin is. I will find you and there will be a reckoning." Pierce respected the threat for what it was, a protective instinct for a vulnerable woman in a hard land. "No harm will come to her. You have my word." On the morning of the third day, Pierce and Eliza left San Angelo just after dawn, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. "Doctor." Oliver stood in front of his office to see them off, and Pierce saw tears in the old man's eyes even as he smiled and waved. "You will write," Dr. Oliver called to Eliza. "Every month, I promise, and we will visit when we can." They rode north and west into increasingly rough country. Pierce led them along trails he knew intimately, through valleys and over ridges, past streams and through forests of juniper and pine. Eliza rode beside him, her eyes bright with interest, pointing out animal signs and asking questions about the territory. It took 3 days of steady travel to reach Pierce's cabin. It sat in a high valley, surrounded by pine forest, with a stream running nearby and a view that stretched for miles. The cabin itself was sturdy but simple. One large room with a stone fireplace, a sleeping loft, and windows that Pierce had carefully fitted with real glass, a luxury in these remote parts. Eliza dismounted and walked slowly around the clearing, taking it all in. Pierce watched her, nervous in a way he had not expected. What if she hated it? What if the isolation was too much? What if she realized he had nothing to offer her but hard work and loneliness? "Pierce, this is beautiful," Eliza said finally, turning to face him with wonder in her eyes. "It is perfect." Relief flooded through him. "It is rough. I do not have much in the way of comforts." "I do not need comforts. I need space and freedom and sky. This is exactly what I need." They spent the rest of the day settling in. Pierce showed Eliza around the property, the garden he maintained, the small barn where he kept his horses during bad weather, the smokehouse where he preserved meat, the lean-to where he worked on furs. Eliza explored everything with enthusiasm, already making suggestions for improvements and additions. That night, they sat outside under the stars, the fire crackling, the forest alive with night sounds. Eliza identified each sound without hesitation. An owl hunting, deer moving through the undergrowth, a fox's bark in the distance. The sounds were not frightening to her. They were conversation, communication, the living world speaking its truths. "You ever think about the future?" Eliza asked softly. "About what you want your life to look like?" "Used to think I had it figured out," Pierce admitted. "Live alone, survive, maybe eventually die out here and return to the earth. Simple, clean, no complications. And now I think that was a pretty empty way to live." He turned to look at her, this strange, wonderful woman who had walked into his life 3 days ago and changed everything. "Now I think maybe I want something different, something more." "Like what?" Pierce took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "Like a partner, someone to share this with. Someone who understands why I choose to live this way, who wants it too. Children, maybe, eventually. A family. The kind of life where I am not just surviving, but actually living. That sounds like a good life, Eliza said, her voice thick with emotion. That sounds like the kind of life I want too. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of possibility hanging between them. Then Pierce reached out and took Eliza's hand. It was calloused from hard work, strong and capable. She squeezed his fingers in return. "We have only known each other a few days," Pierce said. "This might be crazy." "It definitely is crazy," Eliza agreed, "but the best things usually are." Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm that felt natural, inevitable. Pierce taught Eliza the skills of mountain living, tracking, hunting, preparing game, reading weather signs, navigating by stars. She learned quickly, her natural understanding of animals translating easily into practical wilderness skills. In turn, she showed him things he had never noticed. The way wolves communicated across miles through howls that carried information about pack movements. The subtle signals that indicated a predator was near. The hundreds of tiny details that revealed the hidden lives of the creatures around them. They worked side by side during the day, preparing for the coming winter. They cut and stacked firewood, harvested the last of the garden vegetables, hunted deer and elk to fill the smokehouse. In the evenings, they talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams and gradually, inevitably falling in love. It was not a sudden thing. It was gradual, natural, like water wearing stone. Pierce found himself watching Eliza constantly, memorizing the way she moved, the sound of her laugh, the fierce concentration on her face when she was communicating with an animal. He found himself thinking about her first thing in the morning and last thing at night. He found himself imagining a future that included her permanently, irrevocably, and he could see the same feelings reflected in Eliza's eyes when she looked at him. The softness, the longing, the growing certainty that this was right, that they had found something rare and precious in each other. One evening in late September, as they sat by the fire after a long day of work, Eliza said, "I should probably go back to San Angelo soon, check on my uncle, let him know I am all right." Pierce felt his stomach drop. "Are you wanting to stay there?" "No," Eliza said immediately. "No, this is where I want to be. Here with you, but I should visit, make sure he knows I am not abandoning him." "We will go together," Pierce decided. "In a week or so, before the weather turns, we will stay a few days, make sure he is settled, and then come back." Eliza smiled, and Pierce saw relief in her expression. She had been testing him, he realized, seeing if he would try to control her decisions. Together sounds good. That night, as they prepared for bed, Eliza at her bedroll on one side of the cabin and Pierce at his on the other, a distance they had carefully maintained out of propriety despite everything else. Pierce found himself unable to sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, listening to Eliza's soft breathing, and felt the distance between them like a physical ache. "Pierce," Eliza's voice came soft through the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yes. I am tired of this," she said. "This pretending, this distance. I know we are supposed to wait, supposed to be proper, but nothing about our situation is proper, and I am tired of sleeping across the room from someone I love." Pierce sat up, his heart hammering. "You love me. Of course I love you. How could I not? You are everything I never knew I was looking for." Pierce crossed the cabin in 3 strides and knelt beside Eliza's bedroll. In the faint light from the banked fire, he could see her face, open and vulnerable and completely certain. "I love you too. Have for weeks now. I was just too afraid to say it." "Then say it now," Eliza whispered. "I love you, Eliza Oliver. I love your strength and your strangeness and your absolute certainty about what matters. I love the way you care about things that other people dismiss. I love how you see the world. And I want to spend my life with you if you will have me." Eliza reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I will have you, today, tomorrow, always." When Pierce kissed her, it felt like coming home. She tasted like wood smoke and wild honey. And when she kissed him back with equal fervor, he felt the last of his walls crumble. They held each other through the night, not making love yet, but simply holding, touching, reassuring each other that this was real, that they had found each other against all odds. The next morning, Pierce woke with Eliza in his arms and felt a contentment he had never experienced. She stirred against him, and when she opened her eyes and smiled, he knew he wanted to wake up like this every day for the rest of his life. "Marry me," he said, the words out before he even thought about them. Eliza's eyes widened. "What? Marry me? Properly, officially?" "We will go to San Angelo, talk to your uncle, find a preacher, make this legal and binding and real." "It already is real," Eliza said. "I know, but I want the world to know it too. I want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours." Eliza's smile could have lit the whole valley. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Pierce Sullivan." They made the journey to San Angelo 2 weeks later, arriving on a crisp October morning when the air held the first real hint of coming winter. Dr. Oliver greeted them with delight, and when they explained their intention to marry, he insisted on hosting the ceremony at his office, inviting the whole town. Most people came out of curiosity more than goodwill, Pierce suspected. The strange woman who talked to animals and the wild mountain man getting married, it was too interesting to miss. But there were some genuine well-wishers too. Sheriff Carter attended, gave Pierce a nod of approval. Henry Anderson came, somewhat to Pierce's surprise, and congratulated them gruffly. A few other ranchers and townspeople who had benefited from Eliza's gift with animals offered their best wishes. They married on a Sunday afternoon, with a traveling preacher officiating. Eliza wore a simple dress of forest green that made her eyes brilliant. Pierce had trimmed his beard and tied back his hair, though he refused to wear anything fancier than his best work clothes. They spoke their vows in front of the assembled crowd, and when Pierce kissed his bride, he heard both gasps of scandal and genuine cheers. They stayed in San Angelo for 3 more days, long enough to ensure Dr. Oliver was well stocked for winter and comfortable with their plan to visit again in spring. Then they headed back to the mountains, husband and wife, partners in all things. Winter came early that year, but Pierce and Eliza were ready. They spent the long, dark months in their cabin, working on furs, reading aloud to each other from the small collection of books Pierce had accumulated, making love by firelight and talking about their future. They discussed adding rooms to the cabin, starting a larger garden in spring, maybe acquiring a few milk goats or chickens. In February, Eliza told Pierce she was pregnant. He received the news with a mixture of joy and terror. A baby, here in the wilderness, miles from the nearest doctor. But Eliza was calm, confident. She had helped animals birth young countless times. She understood the process, and she trusted her body. Dr. Oliver made the journey to the cabin in late summer, arriving 2 weeks before Eliza was due. He stayed to assist with the birth, and on a warm August morning in 1877, Eliza delivered a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Oliver Sullivan, after both their families. Pierce held his son for the first time and felt something profound shift in his understanding of the world. This tiny person, helpless and perfect, was his responsibility, his legacy, his future. And he knew, looking at Eliza, exhausted but radiant, that everything had led to this moment. Dr. Oliver stayed for a month, helping with the baby and growing visibly weaker each day. The journey had taken a toll on his failing health. When he finally felt ready to return to San Angelo, Pierce accompanied him, ensuring he made the trip safely. But 3 weeks after returning home, Dr. Oliver died peacefully in his sleep. Pierce brought the news back to Eliza, held her while she cried for the uncle who had been more father than guardian, who had given her a home and never once made her feel like a burden. They held a memorial service in the cabin, just the two of them and baby Thomas, saying goodbye to a good man who had believed in love and family above all else. Life continued. The seasons turned. Thomas grew from infant to toddler to young boy, and Pierce marveled at how much he was like his mother. He showed an early affinity for animals, could calm a spooked horse before he could write his own name, spent hours in the forest communicating with creatures in ways that reminded Pierce achingly of Eliza. When Thomas was 4, Eliza gave birth to twins, a girl and a boy they named Clara and Henry. The cabin grew more crowded, more chaotic, more filled with life and noise and love. Pierce added 2 new rooms and a larger porch. They acquired chickens and goats, expanded the garden, built a proper barn. Occasionally, they made the trip to San Angelo, staying a few days to trade furs and supplies, to see how the town had changed. Each time, Pierce noticed that Eliza received less suspicion, more respect. People had heard stories of the Mountain family, of the woman who could talk to animals and the children who seemed to have the same gift. Some still thought it strange, but increasingly, people came to see it as useful, even admirable. One summer, when Thomas was 10 and the twins were 6, a severe drought struck the region. Cattle died by the hundreds, water sources dried up, ranchers faced ruin. Word spread through the countryside about Eliza Sullivan and her unusual abilities, and desperate people began making the long trek to the cabin in the mountains, asking for help. Eliza could not refuse them. She spent weeks traveling to various ranches with Pierce and the children, helping locate underground water sources, advising on how to keep remaining animals healthy, teaching people to read the signs that would help them survive the crisis. She asked for no payment, only that people treat the land and its creatures with more respect. By the time the drought finally broke, Eliza had become something of a legend. The woman who listened to the earth, they called her. The one who understood. People still thought she was strange, but now they also thought she was essential, valuable, someone to be protected and respected. Years passed. The children grew. Thomas, at 18, fell in love with a rancher's daughter named Mary who thought his ability to communicate with horses was the most romantic thing she had ever heard. They married and built a small house nearby, staying close to the family. Clara, fierce and independent, announced at 16 that she wanted to study medicine and become a doctor. Henry, quiet and thoughtful, seemed content to simply live on the land, helping his parents, learning everything they could teach him about survival and respect for the natural world. Pierce turned 40, then 45, then 50. His hair and beard went silver. His body bore the marks of decades of hard living, but he was still strong, still capable. And when he looked at Eliza, now in her mid-40s but still beautiful to him, still vital and passionate and completely herself, he felt the same awe he had felt that first morning when he heard her speaking to coyotes and knew his life would never be the same. They sat on their porch one evening in the summer of 1896, 20 years after that first meeting. Thomas was visiting with his wife and their 2 young children. Clara had just returned from her medical training in Dallas, full of stories and plans. Henry was in the garden, talking softly to the plants in a way that Pierce no longer found strange. The sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of gold and purple, and the world was full of the sounds of life continuing, generation after generation. You ever regret it? Eliza asked, leaning against Pierce's shoulder. Giving up your solitary life for all this chaos? Pierce looked at his family, at the home they had built together, at the life that had emerged from a chance encounter in the Texas scrubland 2 decades earlier. Not for 1 second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Eliza Sullivan. She talks to animals, they used to whisper, Eliza said with a smile, like it was something shameful. You listen better than most people do, Pierce said, echoing the words he had spoken that first day. That is not shameful. That is a gift, and you taught our children the same gift. We taught them together, Eliza corrected. You taught them strength and protection. I taught them communication and understanding. They got the best of both of us. They did, Pierce agreed. He pulled Eliza closer, kissing the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, still wild with herbs and sunshine. And so did I. As darkness fell over the valley and stars began to emerge in the endless sky, the Sullivan family gathered inside for dinner. 3 generations around one table, telling stories and laughing and planning for tomorrow. Outside, a wolf howled from the ridgeline and Eliza tilted her head slightly, listening to the message in the sound. The pack is healthy, she said. New pups this year. The alpha sends greetings, Clara laughed. Mom, you are never going to be normal, are you? I certainly hope not, Eliza replied, her eyes sparkling. Normal is terribly boring. Pierce looked around the table at his family, at the evidence of a life well lived, a love well tended, a risk well taken. He thought about the mountain man he had been, alone and convinced that was all he deserved or needed. He thought about the strange, beautiful woman who had walked into his life and taught him that listening was more important than speaking, that understanding was more valuable than judgment, that love was worth every risk and sacrifice. To listening better, Pierce said, raising his glass in a toast. To listening better, his family echoed, and the sound of their voices filled the cabin, chasing away the darkness, celebrating the light they had built together. Many more years passed. The new century arrived, bringing changes to the territory that became the state of Texas. Roads improved. Towns grew. The wild frontier slowly gave way to settlement and civilization. But in their mountain valley, Pierce and Eliza continued to live much as they always had, with respect for the land and the creatures that shared it. When Pierce was 63, the same age Dr. Oliver had been when Pierce first met him, he fell ill with pneumonia. For weeks, Eliza nursed him tirelessly, using every herb and remedy she knew, calling on their now adult children to help. Pierce drifted in and out of consciousness, fever burning through him, but always, when he opened his eyes, Eliza was there. You are not allowed to die, she told him fiercely one night when the fever was at its worst. We have too much left to do, grandchildren to watch grow up, gardens to tend, winters to survive. You do not get to leave me yet, Pierce Sullivan. Pierce recovered slowly, stubbornly, as if sheer will could overcome the weakness in his lungs. And as his strength returned, he realized that Eliza had been right. They did have more to do, more life to live together, more sunrises to watch, more moments of perfect understanding and connection. They lived into their 70s, both of them, watching their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. The gift of animal communication passed through the generations, becoming a family legacy rather than a source of shame. The Sullivan family became known throughout the region as people who understood the land, who could be trusted to mediate between the needs of settlement and the requirements of the natural world. On a warm spring morning in 1912, Pierce and Eliza sat on their porch, now both white-haired and weathered but still strong in the ways that mattered. Thomas visited regularly, bringing his now grown children. Clara had become a respected doctor in San Angelo, using both her medical training and her mother's understanding of natural healing. Henry had taken over managing the property, living in his own cabin nearby with his wife and children. "We did well," Eliza said, taking Pierce's hand. "Built something good." "We did," Pierce agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible. Do you remember that first morning, when you found me with the coyotes? I remember thinking you were either crazy or magical. Turned out you were both." Eliza laughed, the sound still as bright as it had been 40 years earlier. "And you were a grumpy mountain man who thought he wanted to be alone forever. I was a fool who did not know what he was missing until you showed me." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the valley, to the conversations of birds and the rustling of creatures in the undergrowth. After all these years, Pierce still did not have Eliza's gift of true communication with animals, but he had learned to hear what she heard, to understand in his own way the living world around them. "I love you," he said, words he had spoken thousands of times but that never lost their meaning. "Every day I love you more." "And I love you," Eliza replied, squeezing his hand. "My mountain man, my partner, my everything." When Eliza died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, Pierce grieved deeply but without regret. They had been married for 53 years, had built a family and a legacy that would continue for generations. He lived another 2 years without her, cared for by his children and grandchildren, and when he finally passed on a cold winter morning, his last thought was of Eliza, young and vital, standing in the sunlight surrounded by coyotes, teaching him to listen better. Their great-great-grandchildren still live in the valley, still maintain the cabin that Pierce and Eliza built together, still carry the gift of understanding and communication that changed a family's destiny. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the light is just right, people swear they can hear a woman's voice singing to the animals, and a man's laugh in response, echoes of a love that transcended time and convention and every expectation of what was possible. The story is told around campfires and dinner tables, passed down through the generations. She talked to animals, the story goes. They whispered about her like she was strange, like she was wrong. But the mountain man knew better. He said she listened better than most people do. And because he listened to her, because he understood what she was trying to teach, they built something extraordinary together. In the end, that is what love is. Listening, understanding, seeing another person truly and completely and choosing them anyway. Choosing them because of who they are, not despite it. Pierce and Eliza understood that from the very beginning, and it made all the difference. The Sullivan family property remains to this day, a protected piece of wilderness where animals still roam freely, and people still practice the old ways of living in harmony with nature. And if you visit on the right day, if you are quiet and patient and willing to listen, you might hear the conversations happening all around you. The language of the natural world, still speaking, still teaching, still waiting for those wise enough to pay attention. Just like Eliza taught her children and they taught theirs, listen better, understand more deeply, love more completely. That is the legacy that matters. That is the story worth telling. And it began on a dusty morning in San Angelo, Texas, in 1876, when a mountain man heard a woman speaking to coyotes and had the wisdom to recognize that he was witnessing something extraordinary, something worth changing his entire life for. He was right. It was extraordinary. And it changed everything, for all the generations that followed, creating a legacy of love and understanding that continues to this day, proof that the best things in life come from being brave enough to listen, to really listen, and to act on what you hear.